So as I said, I'm from the Eduardo Mondlane University, and I'm here representing this large group of people from 4 different institutions. Today I'm going to be talking about the ACES project, which is a ESPA-funded project that is being implemented in Mozambique for a 3-year period. A bit of contextualization, about 70% of the land in Mozambique is covered by forests, being Mopani and Miombo woodlands the main forest ecosystems in the country. These forest ecosystems provide, of course, goods and services for most or more than 80% of the population, both rural and urban population. And there's a whole lot of goods and services provided by the forest ecosystems, as most of the people depend really on these ecosystems for subsistence. Charcoal is just one of those services provided by the forest ecosystems, and at the current levels of production and sustainable practices and the huge amount of volume exploited for charcoal production, about 17 million cubic meters are produced every year. So it makes it one of the most important activities for both rural and urban economies. But also, it's one of the main concerns right now in the country, being pointed out as one of the main drivers of forest degradation in Mozambique. In the last decade, considering this dependence on rural and urban economies on the forest ecosystems, the government of Mozambique has put an emphasis on developing commercial agriculture, forest plantations as a way of leveraging the country's economic development. So that's important, but of course it will impose some land cover changes, and of course the respective ecosystem services provided for these from these ecosystems. With that in mind, we developed the ACES project, which intends to contribute to poverty alleviation in Mozambique by addressing these linkages between land uses, ecosystem services, and well-being in the country. We have 5 specific objectives. The first one is to create a framework to analyze these linkages between land use, ecosystem services, and well-being, to collect data and analyze these relationships, to formally test hypotheses about those relationships between the 3 issues, to create future scenarios of land use in Mozambique, and finally to put this information, turn this information into better land use policy and practices. Our structure is like this. We're working in work packages. We have 5 work packages. Those are all interlinked. Work package 1 is intended to design analysis frameworks and identifying pathways of impacts. Work packages 2 and 3 both work very close together, trying to collect biophysical and socioeconomic data, and put this data, integrate this data with work package 4 to test hypotheses about the land use and all these relationships. And all these go into work package 5, which intends to develop future scenarios and produce information to relevant land use policy and practice. Our methods, before the methods, our study regions, we intend to cover 3 regions, the main regions in the country, the north, the central, and the south. The north region is Niassa province. We'll cover Niassa province, which is one of the main agricultural and forestry corridors in the country, a part of conservation activities that are going on. Just for reference, the biggest conservation area in the country is located in Niassa. Then the central region, in the Beira corridor, it's the main and historical agricultural development corridor in the country, and it's where the main commercial agriculture activity is going on in Mozambique. And finally, the southern Mozambique, it's a bit different from the others in the way that the charcoal production is the main activity, and it's the main center of charcoal production for two main cities in the southern Mozambique, the Xai-Xai, which is the capital of Gaza province, and the Maputo city, which is the capital of the country. So really, charcoal is the main issue in this region. Our methods are multidisciplinary and multi-scaled, and we intend to combine several ecological, socioeconomic, and geospatial techniques to address different space and temporal scales. We also use space for time substitution, which is looking for gradients of forest degradation and see how ecosystem services and well-being changes along these gradients. We also use the Bayesian Belief Network, or BBN, to engage stakeholders in developing future scenarios and provide information and engage these on the different steps of the project. So in terms of ecological methods, well, the ecological techniques intend to cover from low to medium scales, both space and temporal. Then these will be integrated with remote sensing and GIS techniques to upscale to the district level and to the national level. And finally, a combination of socioeconomic techniques will allow to cover different scales from the local to the national level. Sorry, I can't go back. Okay, just talking now about the working in progress, the 9 months of project implementation and the different steps that we've been through. There are 6 main milestones that we've gone through. We first identified the key ministries, and we had a meeting with those ministries informing about the project and identifying focal points in each ministry. After that, we had a meeting at the provincial level since we started our project with the southern region, so we wanted to touch the provincial level in Gaza province. So we had a meeting informing about the project and getting recommendations to implement the project. So in that meeting, we had government institutions, non-governmental organizations in the private sector. Followed was the pilot study conducted in the Mabalane district to basically test our methodology. In the next step, we organized a national stakeholders workshop to refine our objectives, our methods, but also to engage them and start the BBN exercise at the national level. Then we conducted the first field campaign that I'm going to talk in a few seconds to cover the whole district. And the scenarios development working with BBNs are still under development. Okay, talking about the first field campaign, as I said, it was based in the Mabalane district. Okay, this is the Mabalane district, and we plan to cover 10 villages. Okay, the 10 villages were located across a gradient of forest degradation. So we have the green villages, which are considered the pre-charcoal boom, which means less degraded forest. Then we have 2 villages in the medium of the charcoal boom, which is medium degradation level. And then the post-charcoal boom villages, the green ones here in the south, which we thought they would have the most forest degradation. So this data was collected for 8 weeks between August and September, and is being analyzed. It's a lot of data. This is our sampling effort. We were able to cover 6 villages along the gradient that I just talked, with a lot of forest plots, a lot of agricultural field plots as well, collecting data not just on vegetation, grass, woody vegetation, soils, but also the fauna component. So, and also we were able to use a lot of the socioeconomic techniques to collect data on well-being, wealth rank, and issues like that. So as I said, the data is being analyzed, so I'm not presenting really any data. So talking about the charcoal production in the district, the district went through several steps. or key development steps. So back in the 90s, right after the Civil War in 1992, the charcoal production was very sporadic and mostly to overcome the drought of 1994. Then from 2011, the licensing to charcoal production increased substantially, and the district experienced and experiences up to now a boom in the charcoal production. Together, the prices started to increase. So it's a good livelihood alternative for the population. We were able to find that more than 70% of the households in the district Okay, 76% of the households in the district are engaged in small-scale charcoal production. Some of them have their own plots for charcoal production, but some are employed by outsiders who have licenses to produce charcoal in the district. So there's currently 156 licenses admitted to the district. And one benefit from these licenses is that there's an obligation of 20% of the revenue from this license to be given back to the communities. However, there's a very limited capacity at the community level to manage this 20%, so it is being not used very effectively. But there's a point of entry to improve these revenue. In terms of agriculture, it's mostly subsistence agriculture. Rain-fed being the main crops, maize, cassava, and vegetables. Usually the plots are very small, from 1 to 5 hectares. People don't have enough capacity to increase their fields. And also this is one of the most drier, one of the most drier areas in the country, so it's very dependent on rains, and the yields are very In terms of the BBNs, we were able to conduct 9 workshops at 3 different levels, the national, provincial, and at the village level. The first 2 levels were intended to discuss about the ecosystem services and the existing policies that should be, and what can be done to improve this situation. And at the village level, we intended to discuss, or we discussed issues around how people obtain the resources and what are the main issues related to acquiring these resources. In terms of the preliminary results, these are just preliminary results. We were able to categorize these in 4 groups. And here are the variables that were most repeated by each group during the different workshops. Just for reference, we have started building the BBN. We have now a very complex diagram, but it's still under discussion internally. So we thought it would be good not to share at this point, but it's still it's work in progress. In terms of impacts on policies, well, this is a very complex diagram, but what it intends to show is that there's a whole lot of policies in the country that sustain or benefit the sustainability of natural resources management and improve of the livelihoods of local people. And these are the provisions of these, some of the provisions of these policies. For instance, the forest management plans, the 20% revenue are some of the provisions that are in our policies. However, as we've been discussing here, the capacity to implement these policies are still very low. And with ACES, we think we can find these entry points like the 20% revenue and the forest management plans to support these, the implementation of these policies. In terms of strategies to influence the impact, we have defined and are developing several strategies. Again, it's just work in progress. We're trying to develop those, and will be some of these first 2 were already tested, but the other 3 are still under development and will be tested soon. In terms of lessons learned so far, we still analyzing the biophysical data, but we found that there's very complex relationships between the ecosystem services and the ecosystem condition in terms of structure, species composition, biomass, and we hope that by analyzing this data, we'll be able to unhide these complexities. There seems to be well-being changes across the forest degradation gradient, but whether these changes are abrupt, we still need to analyze the data and figure it out. There's an important need to do a complete value chain analysis for the charcoal production, and we're now expanding our study to the Xai-Xai market and the Maputo market to complete the whole chain. There's a need to create platforms for sharing knowledge. We have started doing some of these, and of course, training at this point is very important, as the limited capacity at district level to implement these activities and recommendations from this project are really low. So training is one of the main issues that is not part of ACES, but we'll find ways to implement training activities at the community level. And I'll thank you all. And